He signed his work, St. Adolf II, Excellency, Duke, Majesty, Emperors, Grand Emperor.
This is a film about Adolf Wölfli, painter, writer, composer.
God, Father, Giant, Lightning. The southern half of the gigantic and majestic creation is my property. Only millions and billions of stars? No, billions and one star. I have flown past them through space in the year 1868. First, the trip over the giant St. Adolf cauldron. On the left, the Nanit star. On the right, the Mirabella, number 6 of the old and new most peculiar St. Adolf giant creation. And around the creation from one star to the next. Who wants to buy these little souvenirs from God the Father himself? And now, frightful catastrophe. Before the eyes of the Holy Ghost, I swing on this hideous hangman's rope in the men's wing of the 5th section, cell number 3.
Well, he was first admitted to a general mental ward, but very soon it was found out that he was far too aggressive, violent, and he couldn't be left with other patients. He was suffering from hallucinations. He heard voices which accused and insulted him, and he retaliated and went for these people whom he suspected to be the originators of those voices. So he attacked harmless patients. He went and tore the ear off one patient radically. At another time, he bit the nose off another patient. An elderly, kindly, harmless man who was resting on a couch and never did anything to hurt anybody, was suddenly attacked by Wölfli. He took him up, threw him against the wall, and we counted 7 fractures afterwards. He didn't die, but of course after that, Wölfli could not be left in a common ward, and he was transferred into a single cell.
Wölfli endured a tragic and terrible childhood. His father, a peasant stonecutter, was brutal and alcoholic. His mother, weak and irresponsible. She died when he was 8. His father, in prison, died soon after. Various farmers who were supposed to foster him whipped, sexually abused him, and treated him like an animal. He seldom attended school. At 12, he tried to interfere sexually with a baby in its pram. At 18, when a girl he fell in love with was forbidden to see him again, he sank into a depression, suffered unbearable bodily heat, and ran around the countryside naked. He went from job to job. He was rejected by a prostitute he wanted to marry. He committed offences against little girls of 14 and 5, for which he went to prison, in his own words, the worst experience of his life. In it, he had a vision of the Holy Ghost. On his release, he once again tried to rape a child, and was now committed to the Waldau asylum, Bern. For 5 years, he deteriorated. Hallucinations triggered outbursts of violence against staff and patients, as has been described by Dr. Rast, who attended him at the hospital. Dr. Morgenthaler then encouraged him to paint, and from 1899 till his death in 1930, he painted, wrote, and composed ornamental music to fit into his designs. Dr. Morgenthaler's study of Wölfli, published in 1920, was the first study of a schizophrenic artist, and in it he noted that Wölfli's subject matter and symbolism expressed an imaginary science fiction world beginning in his childhood, expressed deep sexual guilts and dreads in a visionary, mystical medium, and in his sense of design a formidable inventiveness and sense of order. This is one of Wölfli's largest designs, now proudly hung in the Waldau lecture hall. Among the items of the Wölfli collection at the asylum There were cupboards which were once in the artist's cell and in which he once stored his writings and other materials. They are entirely covered with designs executed on paper, gummed to the wood, and then varnished. The paper is cockled in places, but the colours remain strong and pure, the design typical of all Wölfli's work. In the cupboard are sketchbooks, writings, and a massive autobiography on huge sheets of paper, standing 6 feet thick. This extraordinary book abounds with Joycean puns and neologisms, and is descriptive of terrible descents to death and last-minute rescues by St. Adolfina, Wölfli's mother. Immense journeys and distances measured in hours, and huge sums of money.
And then we amassed on the way a gigantic booty, which in addition to all that we owned on earth, totaled exactly precisely thus. Pong! 117, 993, 25, 755, 875, 800,000 million billion trillion francs. No less than 350 gigantic chariots made of plates of iron, mostly drawn by 20 to 36 horses, and a dozen gigantic heavenly God the Father transporters, and a giant bird transporter, each carrying several million tons, came to the northern Havre of the heavenly God the Father's celestial star, a giant town of more than 800,000 million souls.
Wölfli was schizophrenic. His experience was schizophrenic, and naturally, as a consequence, these traits show up in his work as well. Its content shows Wölfli's belief that he was both God and devil, the creator of a new world, a traveler who went from star to star with a great numbers of queenly wives. His illness reveals itself in a rigid ornamentation and constant repetition. Even normal people show signs of regression while dreaming, and surrealism brought those elements into art. The way Wölfli uses symbols is also typically schizophrenic. He does not use them as signs for something only. For him a symbol is a concrete reality. Wölfli frequently paints the penis and vagina directly. Hidden sexual symbols are also common. What he called his Vögeli also has sexual meaning. The Vögeli is a snail ornament consisting of swelling, dots and ovals. These are, this Vögeli, the elements he uses to form his figures.
I had to be very careful. Before entering his cell, I looked through a peephole whether he was standing just behind the door, whether he was shouting or smashing something, and I was always accompanied by 5 strong male nurses as my bodyguards. When I entered, well, late at the beginning I had to be very, very careful, and this sent me because I seemed then to be rather sportive and perhaps able to have a fight. But later on, when he had started drawing and painting, it was much easier. When I saw him banging at the wall or shouting at the top of his voice, I entered the cell, and my equipment was not a straitjacket or a hypodermic syringe. My equipment was a piece of paper and a pencil. This disarmed him straight away. One could talk to him and discuss his drawings unless one criticized too much.
Wölfli's paintings have been exhibited in the Basel Museum this year and feature in Dubuffa's famous Museum of Art Brut. But this selection of his work is from the Waldau Hospital's own collection.
Frustrated by the catastrophe before the Holy Ghost, by physical strain, suffering, anguish, and by the infinite pains of my frightful bed of sorrows. The Fire Serpent. Explanation. The picture on the front is an engraving of the giant transporter of the round 6,500,000 hour calculated distance of the St. Adolf Ring, where lies the giant city fire snake, the garden of the same name and God's Mountain Peak, which could lie between the island of Madagascar, east coast, and the west coast of Australia, on the same island ring in the Indian Ocean.
This is inscribed round the edge: St. Adolf Bank, St. Adolf Hotel, St. Adolf Factory, St. Adolf Castle, etc. Around the two figures in the middle is a frame of cowbells, and beyond it Wölfli's dicky bird and snail ornaments, typical of all his work.
The middle of the whole chaos. St. Adolf with knife raised to strike the Archduchess Onander, who plunges to her death in a gigantic ocean cavern. In the east, at the age of 6 months, St. Adolf himself fell to his death from a high mountain top. His future wife, Follianta, brought him back to life.
This is an early panel-shaped pencil drawing.
And here's John, an example to rich and poor, young and old. I ask all of you, whosoever you are, where in all this vast world is a living being who has not committed a terrible sin before God or before other people? Ah, well, John said to him, during his rather endless youth, during 60 years of the 17th century, he found himself round about here in the job of a farmer's lad to a fat, earthly farmer. The following Sunday, this same John went for a stroll in the woods with the daughter of the boss, a ravishing child of 5. Well, the devil tempted him. The frivolous excitements of pleasure would not stop goading his old, so neglected conscience. And in this way, he came to rape this innocent child. The boss, catching him at it at once, and in such a violent rage that he grabbed the miserable sinner by the throat held him up over the yawning abyss, and then dropped him down into it. Poor John. Naturally, the next day on the boss's instructions, they buried him a bit out of the way in the cemetery of the Heart of Angels. The said event was the cause of a terrible battle of nations that broke out the same following day at the foot of the cemetery wall.
The Verena Viaduct incorporates landscape, mountains, and the arches of the viaduct into a design of masked heads, devils with moustaches, and Wölfli's obsessional dicky birds, which were half high-heeled shoe, half bird, that were obsessional fixations to him. In the autobiography and elsewhere, there are many instances of Wölfli making collage of pin-ups and beauties.
Ah, could I but see it all over again with the miraculous help of God the Father Almighty. Yes, absolutely everything in the whole world that I saw and lived through, endured and experienced during the 6 years from my birth in 1864 until the year 1870. Yes, throughout a considerable part of the whole inscrutable universe, except for those countless enormous disasters. Oh, my childhood. Oh, happy time. Enigma number 1. Adolf Wölfli? What about that? What does that mean? Thunder of God. What? Adolf beaten to death? Certainly. I have not stopped falling for at least 154 days. On the 3rd day already gasping for air and dead of hunger and thirst. And today I have come back to life again. Well, well. That's it. That's what you call a fall. Yours sincerely, Adolf. Signed, His Deceased and Accident-Prone Majesty, St. Adolf. Sportsman and warrior, naturalist and fisherman, gymnast, boxer, and arch-marshal of musicians. Adolf Wölfli, a catastrophe reformed.